Hello, people of X. I'm here to talk about peptides, or what's become a synonym for drugs for stupid people. Is that basically it? Is that more or less where we're at? Um, um, it's kind of like wanting to do your own heart surgery or something. It's kind of like you want to be a rebel without a cause. I just want to try drugs, man. What's wrong with that? I think you get like two columns of people. One, people who rebel against anything, and then two, people who I don't know. I guess like folks that love taking drugs in general. Both are pretty maladaptive, and need help. Eureka, do you have some comments? Eureka, your mic is on. You're gonna have to speak, or you'll be removed. Okay, time to go. Let's try this guy, Arthur. Still Arthur. Okay, Arthur's gone too. Um, Charles, maybe. This product kind of sucks. Um, Charles, you're on.
Hey Martin, how's it going?
Good.
Yeah, I'm glad you're hosting this conversation about peptides. It's crazy to see so many young people taking drugs and being swept up by this whole phenomenon. But
It's kind of funny because my dad's generation and maybe earlier part of my generation, you would take dangerous drugs. Now guys are taking placebos.
yeah, seriously, I love drugs, but cocaine, ketamine, I love it.
Yeah, it's kind of like, well, you know, drugs that work or do something, those are out of style. We want placebos now.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I had a question, like kind of off topic of this, and I know it's like you just started on this conversation, but it was more crypto related. But like,
Okay.
it was about Nigabutt token on Solana.
I don't know what that is.
Oh, okay, that's okay.
Yeah, sorry, can't help you. Sibjacks?
Hey, Martin. I just want to know what your hesitation is against peptides. Maybe I missed that part earlier. Well, like, what is the biggest concern that you have?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like the most insane thing ever. They're drugs that don't work, right? So there's drugs, pharmaceuticals. Those are molecules that have been tested and proven to work. And then there's this stuff which isn't that. So like the concern is there's not a personal concern. I no I could not possibly like you could divide my IQ by two and I still wouldn't be stupid enough to take peptides. Um, or colloquially what's been referred to as peptides. Um, you know, there are actual peptides. So it's sort of hard to understand sometimes. Um, but when I say peptides, what I really mean are drugs that are unapproved and haven't been studied, like BPC 666. And yeah, I mean, it's the craziest thing to me. Like you can literally get ChemDraw or a MolDraw or JS Mol or something, and just draw out whatever molecule you want and pretend that it's a medicine. But reality, unfortunately, is more complicated. You just take some pretty little carbons, some pretty little nitrogens. Oh, you know what? I should make this and take it. I mean, what retard planet are we on where this is a good idea?
Can I jump in here? So, my interpretation, and I know people who take it, my interpretation of the reason that they take it is that it has, performance enhancing benefits. Specifically, like, there's BPC 167. I think I'm not 100% familiar with that one. I think the one I'm more familiar with that I know somebody who takes is uh, the growth hormone secretagogue. So that
Yeah, those are
always.
FDA. Those are FDA approved drugs. They're approved for people who are sick and have diseases. Um, but yeah, I mean, there are medicines out there that you can take as a healthy person if you want.
It's a
Um,
peptide, though. I think it's what
Peptides
CJ.
have been around for 100 years. I mean,
It's, it's not
peptides.
FDA. It's not FDA approved. To your
No,
point,
they are. GHRHs are approved. Where do you think? Where do you think they
specifically,
come from?
specifically like CJC 1295. That's not.
Well, there's lots of different GHRHs, but there are approved GHRHs, and
Right. All I'm saying is that there is, the counter to your point is that there are legitimate uses, as you were just saying. There's,
no, you're not. You're not
GHRs.
making sense. You're not making sense.
Also,
The what you're saying is there are FDA approved drugs that you can take, and
CJC isn't FDA
very
approved.
yeah. Just quiet down for a second. And similar drugs that you can take that are substantially similar. That not every drug that's been researched gets FDA approval, but when you have a class of drugs that's FDA approved and proven to work, yeah, you can take those if you want. You can go to your doctor and get a prescription for them. That's a pretty different concept from something like VPC 157, where you know there's no indication this drug does anything for anybody.
That's fair.
Uh,
That's fair. So you're specifically not referring to those that have actual effects.
yeah, medicine is the stuff that works,
So,
and
but you're saying
quote unquote
peptides
peptides.
you're saying peptides as a whole, but there's obviously peptides
No.
that
When I
has.
say peptide, I'm a pharmacologist. When I say peptides, I know what the word means, right? It's you guys that don't know what the word means. I know what a small
Enlighten
protein is.
us.
What's that?
Enlighten us. The
Yeah,
canonical term of peptide
a
that I'm
peptide.
sure
It's
when
just
you
a
say peptide retard debate, I'm sure you're referring to the canonical term and you're not here to like lecture us on the difference of definitions.
no. I'm referring to the colloquial term. Peptide. Peptide is a small protein. It's generally thought to be 40 amino acids or less. It generally does not include, for what it's worth, variations and extensions on peptides, like an acyl extension with amino acids. I'm sorry, with a fatty acid half-life extender and things like that. It's generally a straight chain linear amino acid sequence. And for example, BPC 157 would classify as a peptide, whereas most GLPs would not, interestingly. In any event, when I say the word peptide, I mean pharmaceutical, class peptide that, drug companies are investigating in clinical trials. When I
Hmm.
meet, that's when I think of the word
So
peptide.
CJC 1295
Okay,
fits that
listen,
exact definition, does it not?
yeah. So when I'm talking, you don't talk. Um,
Yes, sir.
so thank you. So when I think of the word peptide, that's what I think of. I think of the drug that I've developed. Like I've developed intranasal oxytocin for autism. That is a peptide. Um, when I use the word peptide retard debate, what I'm thinking is what people think about when they think about peptides, which is some weird drug from some Indian website that they can order and take and think they're cool. That's what the class of drugs I'm talking about. When you talk about an FDA approved drug or drugs that almost got FDA approved or were tested vigorously or very similar to drugs that got FDA approved, those are to me not in the colloquial term peptide. That is much more of a, you know, it's still a research chemical, obviously, but you have different shades of retardation. I don't think you should ever take a drug that's not FDA approved. There's no point, right? Everything you need is FDA approved. There's very few drugs you need to go to some weird third grade market, especially as a healthy person, right? I mean, if you're dying of Duchenne muscular dystrophy and you've heard that there is a drug in Asia that might help with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, sure, go get it. But if you're a healthy individual, which most people taking these quote unquote peptides are, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for you to go out and try some random medicine. It's antithetical to what medicine is, right? So I think that obviously GLPs were discovered and invented by the pharmaceutical industry and perfected by the pharmaceutical industry, and the GLPs that are available in this gray market or whatever, look, they're just in essence ripped off, pirated medicines. It's pirated intellectual property, quite frankly, and that's fine. If you can't afford medicine in the U.S. and you need to pirate medicine, I guess you can do that. But that's not really what I mean by peptides. Those are just FDA-approved drugs that you're stealing. And I think, the need for like a GHRH drug, tesamorelin, which is a drug I tried to acquire once, is available. It is an FDA-approved drug for lipodystrophy. The HGHs are substantially similar. They've been FDA-approved for a long time for growth, for short stature. And so, like the need to take some like different GHRH that's not approved makes no sense to me, because it's like, well, you can get tesamorelin it's very hard to get tesamorelin. It's very expensive, but you can take HGH. You don't really need this weird third-party peptide, unless I guess you want to be a bodybuilder or something like that, in which case I think you need your head checked regardless. But the this whole space just mystifies me. Dirk,
Hey, Martin.
what's up?
I just had some questions just because I really respect your opinions when it comes to pharmacology and all that. And I just kind of wanted to find the edges of what your argument actually is, because I think we can mutually agree that peptides are useful. Insulin has been around forever. And, to your point about all of the FDA approved peptides that do exist out there and have proven useful, um, it seems like your argument is basically not against peptides themselves, but more
Well, you can't. Yeah.
the whole movement that's come out as far as people basically self-administering
Yeah,
and going to all these sketchy third parties.
DIY doctor. You watched an
Yeah.
episode of Dr. House or asked ChatGPT once, and you think you're ready to be a physician for yourself. I mean, it's insane.
Right.
Peptides are just one of half a dozen to a dozen medicinal classes. You have antibodies, you have small molecules, you have therapeutic proteins, recombinant proteins. You've got some hybrids sometimes of these. You've got gene therapy. You've got antisense, or generally, any kind of nucleic acid therapy, of which that breaks down to a few more types. There's just a handful of drugs, of classes of medicines, and peptide is one of them. It's kind of one of the smaller ones. It's not that. It's generally thought to be very undesirable. Some of the peptides issues have been modified to provide, some of the shortcomings, limitations of the shortcomings, with half-life and things like that. So there have been some attempts to make peptides a little bit better as a class, but generally pharma avoids them if they can. And so, yeah, it's like no different to me than thinking about when somebody says, I do peptides, or I'm interested in peptides. It's to me, it's like saying I'm interested in trucks, or like something really vague like that. I like cars. It's like, oh, okay, well, what do you mean? Which car? It's just mystifying to me that you could lump all peptides, quote unquote, into one area. I mean, there's peptides that have been around for 80 years. They're generally, synthetic hormones, but you can make a lot of different kinds of drugs with peptides. And so,
So would you say that generally, just as a class of pharmaceutical interventions, just that they're not very interesting to you, or that you don't feel like they hold very much future promise?
I mean,
I've always heard
most
that
drug developers don't bother with peptides because they're literally one of the weakest, sort of unstable, ways you can make a drug. The body is full of peptidases and proteases that break peptides up as soon as they hit the bloodstream. So you have to really carefully engineer an amino acid sequence that won't fall apart within seconds. And BPC 157 is a pretty funny one because it's not engineered in any way, and it does fall apart within seconds. So, like, to me, it's really funny to me when people think that they're taking a drug and this drug is dead within 30 seconds of hitting your bloodstream. Obviously, GLPs have become extremely successful. They've been around for a really long time, and they've been hyper-engineered to be stable, longer half-lives, to the point where we have once a week half-life, which is pretty enormous. But those have been heavily engineered by pharma. They're almost barely recognizable as peptides, to be honest.
So it's not like you just need to add an acetyl group here, or make it an amidate or something like that, just that it has a longer half-life or is more stable. It's still uninteresting under that premise, you think?
No, I mean, I think, look, when you're talking about chemical space and chemical matter, right, interacting electronically with other chemical space, it sort of starts to defy whether you're even thinking about, is it a quote unquote peptide? Peptide's really a bond, right? And that bond is reasonably strong. The problem is that we've evolved a gigantic number of proteins like enzymes like proteases and peptidases that break these things up. Now, you can always engineer around that, but the best way to engineer around that is avoiding peptide bonds. Which is what most people do. Is if they have a decent peptide, they turn it into a small molecule, and that's orforglipron, the new GLP agonist that's non-peptidic that Lilly just got approved for. That's going to be an interesting one. They're also much easier to make when you have a small molecule, and then you never have the half-life problem. You get 24-hour plus half-life, whereas in peptides you have to do this crazy rearranging to get that half-life. So you're dealing with these aren't drugs, right? If you wanted to design a drug and you saw a linear amino acid chain, 15 amino acids, you just look at that for 2 seconds and say, that's not a drug. That can't be a drug, because it would have to have its therapeutic effect within seconds, and that therapeutic effect would have to have this long-lasting downstream result. Now, does that happen? The combination of those two things, I would say no. Individually, sure, there are some drugs with short half-lives, but they have well-defined receptors that have these physiological changes. And then there are drugs that have long-lived physiological changes. But to have the combination, I would say, is unprecedented. So, when I look at BPC 157, I can't help but laugh because it's impossible for this drug to do anything, just mathematically. Which is, again, why pharma tends to avoid peptides. I was developing, as I mentioned, intranasal oxytocin. Now, oxytocin is a monomer. It's a 9 amino acid drug, and its half-life is extremely short. But the dream was that this intranasal oxytocin, which did not work for what it's worth, Novartis sold it to me. I was kind of trying to do Novartis a favor by taking this off their hands. And, the hope was there was some nose-to-brain magic transport, which has been theorized for a long time, but I personally, at this point, don't think exists. But the idea that you can get through the blood-brain barrier through the nose, and there'd be fewer peptidases or fewer proteases, and maybe you could activate oxytocin receptors in the brain. That was the thesis. A big trial was done by NIH, and it failed. But, it's a good example of kind of what the problems with peptides are. So there was a drug I acquired called carbetocin, which avoided the major kind of cleavage site, and was far, far more robust with respect to half-life. The problem with that is peptides are bulky. So once you get to 10 amino acids or so, you're at a size that excludes passive transport into cells. You're at a size that excludes blood-brain barrier uptake. And so, this is just a terrible drug class. Now, GLPs work really nicely because, one, they're not really peptides anymore. They've gotten so Frankensteined that, you would call them, I guess you could call them...
post-translationally modified?
Yeah, I don't know if they... My girlfriend's opining here. I wouldn't call it post-translationally modified in a sense. I mean, I would rather call it, they're Amgen used to call them peptibodies. And certainly if you look at Lilly's first, not, I guess it wasn't their first GLP technically, but in Trulicity, dulaglutide, that was a peptibody. The problem with using the word body is it implies the FC region. And if you have a fatty acid, that's not an FC region, but it's good for half-life extension, and that's what the Novo Nordisk's chemistry is. So regardless, I would call them, so we used to call these fusion proteins, but because they're peptides, I don't think there's anything wrong with calling them fusion peptides, which is a term nobody's used yet. But in the protein world, it's not uncommon at all to call them fusion proteins. So I think that, the essence of my beef here is that drugs are complicated. In fact, I'm pretty sure you need a license to prescribe them. And that's taken pretty seriously. You also need a license to get them FDA approved so that doctors can prescribe them. So you have these two licensures, one by the FDA and one by I guess who does the doctor stuff again, hon? It's the MDA or the medical AMA. Yeah. They award you the right to prescribe a drug, and then FDA awards the company the right to make the drug, and you're basically just saying fuck both of those.
Mhm.
I'm gonna decide what drug I'm gonna take, and I'm gonna prescribe it to myself, and that's lunacy. Uh, some people are so good at mechanics that they can fix their own car. God bless them. But I think the amount of people who think they're smart enough to prescribe their own medicine is vastly more than the amount of people who actually are capable of doing this. Now, thank God, peptides, because of their liability, the half-life liability and the metabolism liability, they're basically like BPC 157. They don't do anything. So it's not dangerous, thank God. But it is kind of like, retarded.
The very fact that people are buying random things off the internet and injecting themselves is inherently concerning. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just sort of foolish. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like a mass hysteria. Like, why would you skirt the fact that, the FDA has not approved this quote unquote medicine, which is not a good sign, right? You have to be this weird conspiracy theorist that's like, wow, they're not approving it because you know, there's something, some reason why they don't want to approve it. And it's like, oh, okay. There's so many issues with that, but say for argument's sake that's true. Well, in that case, you have the conditionally required kind of like, well, if it's not approved, it can't be prescribed. But there's still a question of, okay, it's not approved in any country. So it's not just the FDA that has a problem with this. Every single medical authority has thought this through and said, no, this drug is not, we're going to blacklist this drug for conspiratorial reasons.
What is your
It
take
just
on the fact
divides
that
logic.
other countries seem to use or integrate peptides more into their medical practice versus the United States?
Like which?
I was under the impression that Russia and that certain Asian countries, at least for stroke recovery, they use certain compounds like C-Max.
Yeah, there's every country has a few drugs that are approved in that country, but not
Mhm.
in others. But I'm not aware of any systematic kind of like interest in quote unquote peptides. Again, these are God's worst drugs. Small molecules have this beautiful property that they can passively diffuse into cells. Peptides can't. Small molecules have long half-lives. Peptides don't. Small molecules have great metabolism features that are predictable. Peptides don't. There's a reason we use small molecules, and most medicines are small molecules. Then you have the antibody, which is similarly beautiful. It's a gigantic, bulky monster, but it's so exquisitely specific. It's nanomolar or even picomolar potent. And its weakness of being so big it can't passively diffuse turns out to be an advantage, where proteins like antibodies often have a half-life that extends into the months. So, for example, Rituxan you can take twice a year. Part of that is PD, not PK. But in general, most antibodies are monthly or longer dosing, which is a beautiful thing. Peptides kind of live in this shitty, kind of place where you get the worst of both worlds. In fact, you get even worse than the worst of both worlds. You get this very narrow therapeutic window that you have to thread the needle on. And I'm kind of surprised pharma didn't collapse GLP-1 into a small molecule, and that's what I love the name of this drug, orforglipron. I can never say it right. Orforglipron, the first non-peptidic GLP. This is a drug that makes sense. This is a drug that you can make by the ton, really easy to make, and just as effective as GLPs.
And is that a small molecule or is that a peptide?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a non-peptidic small molecule. And so what generally you do is you look at the peptide, you map the contacts, the electronic contacts with the protein. In this case, the protein's the GLP receptor. And you basically say, okay, well, the peptide bonds don't have really anything to do with this. The intramolecular bonds versus the intermolecular bonds. The bonds within the drug are not that relevant, right? As long as you're making hydrogen bonds to the protein, that's what matters. And so you can't do, for example, or at least can't easily do pi stacking with peptides. So you lose that electronic kind of capability. You can do it, but you really need the peptide to make sense, specifically for that. So in general, you can sort of skinny down the drug. It's almost like think about an ice sculpture. Like you can pick away like little parts of imperfections of it, and you get this really perfect small molecule. Nothing is wasted. The entire molecule is contributing to the fold, whereas that's or the fit. Whereas that's not really the case with peptides. Now, from a drug company's perspective, you actually kind of, from an IP perspective, want a peptide because they're hard to make. So they're actually so much harder to make than small molecules. So when Lilly or Novo makes a GLP-1, they really need huge manufacturing plants, which is to their advantage because if a Chinese or an Indian generic drug company wants to make the peptide and make a gigantic amount of copies of it for extremely cheap, they're going to have a really hard time doing so. And so generic Ozempic is coming, but it's also just hard to make. And so the capacity to make generic Ozempic is actually going to be pretty limited. But orforglipron, which is a brand new drug, so it's a long pipeline, that drug's, you can make tons of it for dollars. And that's the like tens of dollars or hundreds of dollars to make tons, literally tons of it. And that's when that drug goes generic in 2040 or whatever, I don't think we'll ever see another GLP again because there'd be no point in sort of taking a GLP when you have, a very cheap pill. And obviously the oral route is also highly preferable for most medicine, right? So that's the other
I was curious about
downside.
that because you mentioned that pharma or big pharma, typically stays out of developing peptides. And my understanding, and maybe this is incorrect, was that a lot of that was due to just the inherent limitations, as you pointed out, with crossing the blood-brain barrier. And
Well, if you have a brain drug.
and the half-life, and these things have to be injected, so that's just naturally less preferable. But and then you're also somewhat mimicking a natural molecule. And what I had heard was that it's then harder to patent, or you have to have actual modifications. Is it just due to the route of administration, you think, that a lot of
peptides are patentable. I mean, there's nothing wrong with patenting a peptide. It's a 20 amino acid alphabet, right? So if you have even 15 a 15 mer, so that means mer means how many monomers there are. So 15 monomer is 15 now polymer, but a 15 unit peptide or 15 amino acid peptide, you have 15 to the 20th power, or actually 20 to the 15th power combinations, which is, not really enumerable in a patent perspective. So peptides go up all the way to 40. So you have, 20 to the 40th power of combinations, which is about as many as many atoms there are in the universe. So there's an almost infinite number of combinations of amino acid sequences. So peptides are very highly patentable. The problem is all the other things you mentioned. And look, I mean, we can take old drugs and get new patents on them. I did it with ketamine. Johnson & Johnson did it with ketamine, and they're still selling billions of dollars of ketamine, which is an old drug from the 1960s. So, it's not hard for drug companies to make money. We love making money. The hard thing is finding a drug that works. That's the hard part. And the interesting thing is watching people want to take drugs that don't work. And again, what I kind of opined on today on the podcast was this is mostly an act of rebellion. It has nothing to do with thinking about medicine and thinking about pharmacology and clinical trials. It's just, I'm willing to be daring and take some random stuff. And, I hate the medical establishment, which, is kind of crazy because if you had a real serious disease, you would run to the medical establishment to help you. But when you're a healthy person, you want to try some random shit, it's kind of this weird act of rebellion that doesn't sort of make sense to me.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure. Hey, Dirk?
Yeah.
Oh, Jordan. Sorry, I was trying to call the next guy.
Oh, hey, Martin. Quick question for you. So I think I really do agree with your perspective that you had on your interview earlier today about there's a big kind of culture building that, you don't want to pay Pfizer. I don't want to pay insurance. I want to do this myself. And I really do think that is a growing concern. But just a quick question. Can you compare, or I guess further explain what you meant earlier today about the long half-lives that big pharma wants to deal with?
Yeah, I mean, if your drug isn't around in the blood, your blood, it takes about 12 seconds for your entire bloodstream to turn over. So the blood in your toe to the blood in your brain, in about 10, 12 seconds, the entire blood will turn over. Sometimes we call it volume of distribution in pharmacokinetics. And so if your drug doesn't last, the 12 seconds, it can't bind its receptor. Even worse than that, even if it does last 12 seconds, most of the body's functions are kind of on-off switches, and maybe think of them as springs actually. So you step on the spring and some action occurs, but when the drug steps off the spring, the action returns. So histamine is a really good example. The histamine receptors release a number of allergic responses. So by blocking the histamine receptor with a drug, say like Claritin, you will block the ability for the body to create all these allergic responses that'll make you sneeze and do things like that. But when the histamine blocker is out of your system, guess what happens? Allergies are back, which makes sense because you have to depress the allergy creation system by blocking the protein from being activated by histamine. You're standing in between histamine, which wants to reach and grab that histamine receptor so bad, and you stand right in the middle of it like a bouncer, and you say, no, 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 my chemical matter is standing in between you and the receptor. There's no possible way you're going to activate this receptor. And then Martin has a nice day with nice, clear breathing. That's how a drug works. But if I injected a peptide that did that instead, well, the peptide would do its job for, I don't know, 5 minutes at most, and then I'd start sneezing again after 5 minutes. What kind of drug is that? I need a drug that's going to stay there and last for days, ideally. Because if I take the drug every day, all the drug that eventually will disappear, because no drug lasts forever in the bloodstream. You don't want it to last forever, but you couldn't even make one that lasts forever because you have metabolism. You have proteins like albumin that will grab the drug and send it off for disposition. So you ideally want to time it around, well, what's my drug's half-life? By the time half of it is gone, how long does that take? If it's 8 hours, that's pretty good. So by the time it's 16 hours, 25% of the drug is still in the system, and I can design the amount of drug I need you to take so that all of the histamine receptors are saturated and no histamine activation is happening. And that's what drug development is all about. You do all these equations and you think about it and so forth. And, half-life is one very important part of that. It's not the only important part of that. But if you have a half-life that's 0, you don't have a drug. So I've never really heard about drugs that have truly short half-lives. Now, there are some rare examples. Somebody mentioned adenosine. The thing about adenosine is it has a very short half-life, but you have to continuously give it. So you give it over an IV, and it's sort of like you're plugged into it. And it's a really nice feature because the second you want the drug to be out of your system, you turn off the IV. You can't do that with Claritin. I take Claritin for whatever reason. If I wanted allergies, I could not get them until the drug washed out of my system. So really long half-lives can be a liability to some extent. If you have Rituxan or some other antibody in your system and it's creating an adverse reaction, well, there's no way to get it out. You have to wait the 2-3 months before the drug will be out of your system. So, half-life is one of the most important parts of pharmacology. And unfortunately, with peptides, you just don't have it. So you have to if you want to work with a peptide, you have to modify the crap out of it until it has a much longer half-life. And you really can't get too far there. The most you've seen on peptide half-life is you can get dosing to like once a week, which is, it's not bad at all. I mean, once a week is pretty good. But again, you have these other liabilities. So, watching Eli Lilly move to orforglipron is pretty interesting. But small molecules have a limited chemistry capability. Like peptides have one advantage, which is like you can create, like, for example, the GLPs have this unique chemistry where they activate 2 or 3 different receptors, which is kind of harder to do with a small molecule. I mean, it's hard to do with any modality, to be honest. It's kind of a miracle engineering. But, the fact that GLPs are peptides should not really be informative or uninformative. Like, peptides, like I said, have been around for a while. There's great peptides, there's shitty peptides, there's great small molecules, there's shitty small molecules, there's great antibodies, there's shitty antibodies. They're just kind of thing. It's like no different from I don't know, any small class of things like professional sports. There's basketball, there's baseball, there's hockey, there's football. There's no inherent betterness or worseness. It's just sort of a different, kind of features. But it's sort of really bizarre to me when I hear people talk about peptides as if they were a thing that you could generalize, because they're just so, different from each other. Like a drug like GLP-1 is quite different from oxytocin or vasopressin or any of the other peptides that most people have never heard of. GLPs have become kind of the poster child for peptides. They're very impressive. But like I said earlier, they're really fusion peptides where they have all this other crap attached to them to make them last longer. Otherwise, the first peptides, the first GLPs, I should say, you had to dose them 2 or 3 times a day, which is why they weren't really popular drugs. Now that you can dose them once a week, they've become much, much more popular. So, pharma's, this is not creating a new renaissance of peptides for pharma. Pharma still hates peptides. It's just that GLPs have kind of been somewhat popular. Now keep in mind, antibodies and large proteins are all peptidic as well. They're just much larger, 200, 500, 1,000 amino acids, sometimes 1,500 to 2,000 amino acids. And those are, amino acid bonds, but they're proteins. And they still get attacked by proteases and so forth, but they're a lot more stable because they're so large. And they also get glycosylation, post-translational modifications like glycosylation. And so those sugar groups tend to protect metabolism as well, and immune surveillance. So you get these big proteins like EPO is a popular one, a lot of people know, but many others where, HGH is another one. They're very, very large molecules. And as a result, they have good PK. They have really exquisite, high affinity for their target. So anyway, peptides have just been a dog of a class. GLPs sort of came out to some extent originally because they're peptides natively, right? So the GLP hormone is a peptide in your body. So what's better than making the copy of the thing that you have, which makes sense. But usually over time, there still is an interest in creating a synthetic kind of like super peptide or super protein or whatever. And that's typically like a small molecule or some other engineered protein. So, that's what Eli Lilly and Chugai have done with orforglipron. And I'd imagine you're going to get other companies kind of making this. There's a bunch that are out there, like Pfizer bought one recently. There's another one called Structure Therapeutics, and many more. So GLPs are still kind of going strong. But I don't know if that answered the question, but let's keep the conversation moving. Anybody else? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
I would be curious.
Are you talking?
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I just came up as a speaker, but you said speak now or forever hold your peace. Are you talking to me or someone else?
Anybody who wants to speak.
All right. So I was curious to hear about orforglipron. I didn't hear about it previously, but this drug coming out and then retatrutide. Do you think Eli Lilly is a good stock to buy right now?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the stock, but Foundeo is now the name for orforglipron. And yeah, look, it's a small molecule. It's a beautiful pill. Pills are nice. Nobody should be injecting themselves if they can get a pill, right? And so I think that it'll sell really well. It'll probably be lower priced than the other peptides, or the peptides, I should say. And, they can make tons of it at a really low cost, whereas that's not the case with the injectable peptides. In fact, orforglipron, any Indian or Chinese company can make this for nothing. And the problem is it's got a patent. So does retatrutide. So does Ozempic. So does all of these drugs. And so
Mm-hmm.
when you take them from some website, one, you don't know what you're getting. And then two,
Yeah.
it's somebody's IP. I mean, Lilly's $1 trillion company. Do they need more money? Well, whether you think that or not, ultimately, the income Lilly makes does go to research cancer drugs. And if they can't make their money on GLPs, that could mean one less cancer drug every year for the next 10 years that they're taking those profits and trying to make a cancer drug or an Alzheimer's drug. I just had a friend diagnosed with a very aggressive pancreatic cancer. And, Lilly is one of the few places that can take that 20, 30, 40, 50 billion of earnings and go try to make a new drug for cancer. So, piracy is, look, I'm not going to judge anybody if they can't afford a medicine and they want to go get it for cheaper. But I think that, it's still piracy at the end of the day. And it's intellectual property that some scientists work very hard for. So to me, in terms of stock prices, I'm not sure. I think the hard part about, I mentioned this on the podcast, the hard part about pharmaceuticals is that you have to completely reinvent your business every 15 or 20 years, or every 10 or 15 years, actually, because your patents expire. So your patent expires, all the profit goes away, literally overnight. And, you gotta find drugs to not just replace the lost revenue, but grow even further. And it's very hard. I mean, pharma has not been a great place to invest over the last 50 years. The only growth that's really happened has been through mergers and things like that. And it's not been a fantastic, sector by any means. Lilly has sort of gotten this very interesting escape velocity. Nobody's ever been as big as Eli Lilly. But part of it is the GLP craze that is occurring. And when that craze goes away, in terms of revenue, people will always want to lose weight. But once the drugs go generic, it's going to be very hard.
But that's several decades ahead. I mean, they got tirzepatide. I think the patent goes out in like 2036. And now retatrutide is launching, and now this oral drug that you mentioned.
Yeah, but they're all gone in 2040. So
that's. I mean, I'm not planning on holding the stock longer than that.
But the market understands that the assets go away in 2040. So the market is smart and thinks about the cash flows and says, well, what are the odds that Lilly can take their cash flows and recycle them correctly? And one interesting thing that just happened is they bought a company for almost $4 billion that just had 4 patients of data. So a lot of people are scratching their head that they've never seen a biotech with just four patients. They did a phase 1 with 4 people, and Lilly bought it for $3.5 billion. Now, look, maybe that's a good move. Who might have questioned Eli Lilly? But Pfizer, was a good example. Pfizer had the perfect drug for COVID, and they wasted every dollar of that huge windfall. Right? They had this gigantic windfall from COVID vaccine. They were like perfectly positioned, and every dollar that they made, they wasted. And so it's pharma is a portfolio management game where sometimes you get lucky, you get a GLP, but what's even more important is what do you do with those cash flows? And now you could say Lilly developed the first recombinant insulin in 1979 with Genentech. If you just go on mute, I hear your child. It's fine. So Lilly developed the first recombinant insulin, and it made them a fortune. And that fortune was what allowed them to partner with Amylin to do the first GLP ever. Then they dumped Amylin to do their own GLP called Trulicity. And then finally they turned their second GLP, their own proprietary second GLP at least, into Mounjaro. And now obviously, like you said, they have a litany of more molecules coming. But the problem is you approach an asymptote. How fast can you lose weight? There's like a healthy level where you don't want to lose weight any faster. And we've reached that level. So ultimately, I don't know that we'll ever need a better drug than retatrutide. And this is what happened with statins. Do you know of any companies developing statins anymore? No, because we've lowered cholesterol as much as we can lower it. I mean, how much do you want to lower your LDL? We have all the tools we would ever need to develop LDL. So if a startup came to me and said, I want to develop an LDL lower, I want to develop a new statin, I'd say, what are you, crazy? Why? Same thing for hypertension, same thing for many different diseases. So I don't think we're going to see many more obesity drugs after 2040. We're just going to use generic, GLP-1s the same way. If you have a blood pressure problem or a cholesterol problem, you're going to get generic atorvastatin. Lipitor went off patent 25 years ago or 20 years ago. So, that's going to be the future. And I think for Lilly, again, they have their work cut out for them. This is why Buffett avoided drug stocks his whole life, is because, how do you know the management team of Eli Lilly is going to take the cash flows of Mounjaro and Zepbound and future retatrutide and orforglipron and actually recycle them correctly and intelligently? We just don't know. And, if you told Buffett, well, great investment in Coke, but your Coke patent's expired, you're going to have to come up with a new Coca-Cola. It would be the stupidest business in the world. If you told ChatGPT, Sam Altman, sorry, ChatGPT patent's up, you gotta find something new to do. You can't make any more money off ChatGPT. That's the business of pharma. It's very frustrating.
Hey,
I
Martin.
guess you're right, but I was thinking about like a really short-term investment, like just get ahead of the FDA approval of retatrutide,
Well, the market
and
knows it's
then
coming.
maybe
I mean,
sell.
the market understands that, right? The market's been assuming retatrutide will be approved for the last,
3 years.
yeah, 3-4 years or 2-3
But
years.
all right, but you don't expect the stock price will probably rise after
No,
the
the
approval.
market sees ahead of these things. The market hasn't. You're not getting the jump on anybody, right? Like everyone's, waiting for this.
It's a little late for that.
Yeah, it is a little late.
Wait,
Now,
for the
if you do,
for the insulin example,
sorry,
can we expand on that? Because insulin, as you said, it's many decades old, but the prices have maintained pretty high price points.
Before I
despite
expand on
right?
that, I'm happy to take the retard max position on the peptides, because I do feel like you're missing something,
oh, please
Martin.
tell me. What?
And it's nice to meet you, by the way.
Yeah. So what am I missing?
So a lot of the excitement about peptides doesn't seem to be in this like research only field. It seems to be in the black market, like turning into like a legitimate market that doctors can prescribe to these compounding pharmacies, not like a injecting self-diagnosis type.
Well, why would a doctor
environment.
prescribe a drug that doesn't have data on it? If I were a physician, first, I've been told to do no harm. It sounds pretty harmful to give somebody a drug that I don't know that works.
Sure, but there are plenty of drugs right now that have kind of maintained pretty like NAD plus, for example,
Okay.
for whatever reason, has no data, but it's massively popular in LA, New York, and doctors just continue to prescribe it for people.
Doctors prescribe it?
Yeah.
How do doctors prescribe a drug that's not FDA approved?
By writing it on a prescription pad.
And giving it to their patient to go fill at a pharmacy?
Yeah, compounding pharmacy.
A compounding pharmacy. How does that work? What does a compounding pharmacy do?
They take API from a FDA-approved API vendor, and they compound it into a drug, a vial.
And so you can write a prescription for a drug that's not FDA approved?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Because,
how does that work?
Or you can write scripts for drugs that are for a separate indication. That's primarily how ketamine is.
Well, I know what
today.
off-label prescriptions is. That's part of. That's been part of.
You're asking about the actual mechanics of how they do it?
Yeah. How do you prescribe a drug that's not FDA approved?
It's pretty straightforward, actually. Like, the doctor will either write it or fax it into a pharmacy, and the pharmacy will see, 1,000 mg per ml or whatever it is for NAD, and they'll.
Isn't there something called interstate commerce?
So you can have multi-state licensure if you're a compounding pharmacy.
But if a doctor's licensed in New York,
well, no,
and the pharmacy's licensed in New York.
There's a long time ago, somebody told me about something called 505, which is the NDA pathway for making a drug. I've been under the assumption I have to do clinical trials. You guys are. This sounds great.
Well,
So you're
part
just
of
saying it's
the
unfair?
compounding pharmacies can compound drugs that are also on the 503A
Well, no, if I don't have to,
category
if
1
I don't have to
bulks
do clinical
list.
trials, I mean, shit, this is fantastic news. What am I missing?
Does a doctor not lose their medical license if they do something like this?
Well,
No,
that's a great question.
they're able to prescribe these drugs that would also include the peptides coming to category 1, even though there haven't been clinical trials on those peptides.
So I'm trying to figure this out. So if I'm a drug company, let's take that perspective for a second. I don't have to do clinical trials anymore.
Only if those drugs made it to the bulks list.
Okay. But if I'm a doctor, I can now prescribe drugs that haven't been proven to work now.
Yes.
Wait. Why couldn't a doctor do that before, though?
Well,
like if a doctor thinks bubblegum and tree bark, is going to work for someone.
Well, prescription is not, just a piece of paper, right? It's a literal authorization for a pharmacy to dispense an FDA-approved drug.
Well, not necessarily.
Okay.
Actually.
So the compounded drugs, again, they're not necessarily FDA approved or maybe at specific dosages.
Most of them are.
Substituting.
Well, but there's plenty of
compounded pharmacy ones.
Most compounded pharmacies traffic in FDA-approved drugs.
Yeah.
They do a mix, but a lot of them have not been, let's say they substitute, let's say you're allergic to, the generic mix of tretinoin that is prescribed in bulk, by Amazon Pharmacy,
I think
whatever.
We all know what
if you need
compounding pharmacies do. I think the new information here is that compounding pharmacies can give you anything you want.
Not anything, but it would be the list of drugs on category 1.
So what list? When does this list come out?
This list has existed for many years, and
category 1. What's it called?
Category 1, 503A bulks list.
Yeah.
These are the 14 peptides that RFK says he wants to move from category 2 to category 1 would allow these peptides that have not run through clinical studies be prescribed.
So I'm looking for this list.
And if you look at that list, for instance, GHK-Cu has already been on this list for years, and people talk about shooting it up, and it's like, oh, this will get moved to category 1. It's actually already category 1 as a topical, just not as an injectable.
Oh, so these are all for topical. Okay, no, that's not.
Some are topical.
Not all.
I see. I mean, all 5. There's 6 of them. 5 of them are topical.
There should be 30 or so drugs or molecules.
The current list, not the expanded list.
But the current list has like the 20 or 30.
I see 10. I see 216.23. I see 10 drugs, 5 are topical. A bunch of them are like drugs that have been around, like triptan, piracetam. These aren't like interesting molecules in any way. But yeah, I mean, I think that there have been like DESI drugs, for example, that have been around forever. And DESI drugs are technically not FDA approved, but they're prescribable. Like codeine is a DESI drug, for example, as is caffeine. But yeah, these topicals are, I mean, I'm not sure who's using these. But then I see, after balancing the criteria, the FDA has determined that the following bulk substances will not be included in the list of substances that can be used in compounding. Okay. Yeah, I only see 6.
Well, Martin, why do you think doctors can't prescribe non-FDA approved products?
Because there's a law that is called 505, and it's part of the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations, and interstate trafficking of pharmaceuticals without a 505 approval is illegal.
I'm looking at the list. There's like 30 or 40. So
this is the current list?
On the current list. The current list, and clomiphene citrate, EGCG, let's see, coenzyme Q10, so CoQ10.
I mean, I just went to the FDA website.
This is FDA.gov, 503A Category 1 bulk drug substances under evaluation.
Evaluation?
Yeah. So
or approved?
it says under evaluation, but I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I don't think that means I think this is what they're considering.
No, I don't think so.
Yes. This is that's what under consideration means. Under evaluation. This is not yet currently. This is their nomination process. This is what they're trying to finalize.
Let's see.
So, are you okay, Martin, with like compounding pharmacies when it's an FDA-approved ingredient, compounding it?
What does that mean, FDA-approved ingredient?
Like, let's say there's a cancer drug for someone that can't take it.
But what does that mean, FDA approved? What do you? There's no such thing. You have an NDA where you get FDA approval for a drug, or you don't.
Tadalafil.
That's an FDA approved drug.
Where it gets, compounded with a mint or a flavor drug. And becomes a non-FDA approved.
Tadalafil. Anybody can prescribe that drug. It's Cialis, right? I mean, it's been around for 30 years.
Right, but when you mix it with a mint or water, lemonade.
I mean, it's retarded, flavor, but you can do it if you want.
But that's a doctor prescribing a non-FDA approved.
Doctors don't do compounding pharmacy. I don't know what doctors that love to do compounding pharmacies. It's like 0.01%.
Every doctor that works for hims and hers.
Okay, there are. You can get compounded pharmacies, but they are the tiniest part of the pharmaceutical industry. Every normal doctor writes a prescription. You take it to CVS and you get it.
Yeah, no one's saying they're not, but like if they do a mint and a watermelon.
You can compound even if it's under evaluation.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think this is a terrible policy. Allowing people to take drugs that don't work is stupid. It negates the whole purpose of the FDA. Now, I think most of these drugs are just known to not work. So,
Well, I think the point is that some of these drugs could not go through the traditional FDA process.
Well, that's
billions of dollars. And you should also let Dr. Cam on, because he's
if there's a drug that can't go through the process, that's too bad, right? Like there's no royal road to mathematics either. You have to do clinical trials.
Who can afford clinical trials outside of big pharma?
Any drug companies. It's not big pharma. There's 5,000 drug companies.
If it costs, $2-3 billion,
doesn't cost. No drug in the history of mankind has cost $2 or $3 billion to develop. You can get a drug approved for
depending on end-to-end clinical trial of 3 phases.
No, I've never heard of a drug cost that much. I've gotten FDA approved drugs before. It could cost $100 million. It could cost $200 million, but it's very, very rare. That
if you include the overhead, not just development, but the overhead of clinical trials.
I'm a drug entrepreneur. I made a $4 billion drug company. I think I know how much a drug costs to get approval, including overhead. There are people who've gotten drugs approved for $10 million.
Well, let's just say it costs millions of dollars regardless.
Sure. Why shouldn't it? It's a medicine.
If you can't patent it, there isn't an incentive.
You can patent anything. You can always patent, and there is an incentive. There's a 5-year NCE. You get 5 years, new chemical entity. So, ketamine is selling billions of dollars, 50-year-old drug. There's always a way to commercialize something. But, if a drug hasn't gotten evidence, then why the fuck should people be prescribing it? You're sort of saying, well, feel bad for the drug that can't get its evidence. Okay, I feel bad for that, but there's still no evidence. It doesn't mean I'm on a rush to take it if there isn't evidence. Why the hell, should I take it or prescribe it if it hasn't been shown to work? If it's been shown to work, it can get FDA approval.
But if a doctor feels there's enough evidence to prescribe it and they're making the prescription, shouldn't they be?
That's changing the rules. The rules for the longest time have been doctors can prescribe whatever drug they want that's FDA approved for whatever reason they want. If we want to change those rules, It's a terrible, terrible, terrible idea because any drug in the world could be used. And there's only about 1,000 different new active pharmaceutical
Well,
ingredients.
I think 5-3 compounding pharmacies are quite limited in what they can make. They can't make
Yeah,
like
thank
any
God.
biologics. But like if a doctor thinks there's like significant evidence and they're
It's
prescribing
not their role.
NAD or
That's not their role. Doctor's role is to prescribe FDA-approved drugs that the FDA reviewed.
The doctor's role
where
is to help people with their health, not to adhere to
Lord,
the FDA.
Lord, if I
Look, the
could
rules are
jump in.
simple. The doctors aren't there to decide what drugs work and don't. That's
So-
FDA, that's drug companies. The doctors are there to learn about the drugs that are approved and prescribe them because they're safe and effective and they can't hurt their patients that way.
but
They'd be hurting their
doctors can go
patients.
outside the realm of FDA approved drugs. They do that all the time with
I don't know what world you live in, but
the real world.
none of the doctors I know are prescribing random shit.
They don't tell you, hey, eat less, exercise more.
Can we just
You
bring
need
on
a
can we bring
complete
on
lifestyle change?
Dr. Cam, who's actually a doctor, and also probably more pro peptide, but also not too retarded.
Lord, one quick question. I don't know if I misheard you. You said Hims is selling drugs that are not FDA approved. Which drug are they selling that is not FDA approved?
All their ED compounded drugs.
Those are FDA approved, dude. What do you think
Right,
Cialis
exactly.
is?
Wait, the generics are, but they're
But that's all
compounding.
they're
Are you
advertising.
retarded? I think you're retarded.
This is too retarded.
I'm on their.
Hey,
I'm
I
on
said
their
I'm
site
retard
right now.
maxing, okay?
Too retarded.
Look at their ED
Just
meds.
let somebody else
They
talk.
have great
man.
ED
meds.
Let somebody
He's too
else
Wait,
talk.
retarded. Too
Look,
retarded.
Let somebody else
look,
talk, dude.
go on their website.
We've had
Look
him-
at their
I've been on
look
his
at their
website.
mints.
All right, that's enough of you.
Yeah, I'm
They're not
sure
only
that was
selling
about-
generic stuff.
Please,
they're
please
making
mute
their
him.
own drugs.
Please mute him. Please mute him and just get Dr. Cam on.
He's on.
Hi there. There's a lot of misinformation being shared, so I just wanted to clarify some things kindly.
Please.
I'm the founder and CEO of Maximus. We're one of the largest telemedicine companies in the United States, and we work with dozens of compounding pharmacies. So I think there's a little bit of confusion about how they actually operate. So
I mean, I think they should all be illegal for what it's worth, but go ahead.
yeah, I mean that's fair, but there was a statement that was made earlier about doctors prescribing retatrutide through compounding pharmacies.
I don't think
That's-
anybody
that's-
said that for what it's worth, but
I think the guy said it's possible. It's not, because to Martin's point, retatrutide is not an FDA approved drug. There's 3 criteria for which a compounding pharmacy can compound a drug. It has to be a component of an FDA approved drug. It has to have a USP or national formulary monograph, or it has to be on the 503A bulks list. So Reta is not. Now, I'm not saying that it's not possible that there is some rogue compounding pharmacy out there that's doing it. But we employ many dozens of physicians.
well, nobody's picking on your company specifically for what it's worth.
No, I know, of course not. And we only prescribe FDA approved drugs. But yeah,
Let's go.
and the thing I wanted to also clarify is you're right in the sense that for the most part, physicians are only prescribing FDA approved drugs. There are some limited, obviously use cases where they can go outside of that.
I know
but-
a lot of doctors. A lot of these guys would rather stab themselves in the eye than write a compounding prescription.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. The majority of the physicians I know aren't writing prescriptions to compounding pharmacies. It's mostly folks that are in private practice or work in telehealth that's working with compounding pharmacies. But the compounding pharmacies, because they, for the most part, try to be legit script certified, have to stick within a pretty strict formulary of stuff that is, for the most part, either FDA approved or, like I said, has a USP monograph or is on the 503 bulks list. So they can't be, compounding things willy-nilly.
When did the bulks list come out?
It's been around for a long time, but it's
like
constantly
5 years.
updated.
Do you know when?
I don't know the original origins
I
of
think
it.
I don't think it's been around for a long time. I think it came out in 2019.
I think 2019 sounds right.
There were 6 drugs on it. It's been a pretty innocuous drug.
Sure, but I think compounding has been around far.
I know compounding's been around. Everyone knows that. I'm talking about this bulk list.
It's saying 1999.
Yeah, out of 2019.
I'm seeing 1999.
For where?
Perplexity.
Okay. CFR 216, March 21st, 2019.
It's that it was largely irrelevant until the GLP shortage, when compounding pharmacies were able to compound GLPs.
No, are you talking about compounding pharmacies? I'm talking about the bulks list. The bulks list was 2019. Compounding pharmacies have been around forever.
I think they were the first pharmacies.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the bulks list was
2013.
Well, 1997 was the allowance of was the allowance of 503A. 2013, a law required the creation of the bulks list, and the bulks list sort of came out in 2019, but it was developed from 2013 to 2019. But the bulks list has six drugs on it, and I hope they don't expand it. I mean, this is lunacy. You know, either a drug has the evidence that should allow a doctor to prescribe it, or it doesn't. You know, we want to create this like special ed for drugs where they kind of don't have the exact, you know, they don't meet the standard for traditional drug approval, but they should somehow still be fucking given. I mean, how does that work?
The latest bulks list was just updated on April 15th. If you look at the 503A bulks list, there's a couple dozen drugs that are on there.
But that's not a final list. That's an under consideration list, right?
Yeah, but how compounding works is that as long as they're under consideration, they can be compounded. They'd have to be moved into category 2, which is what happened with the peptides, for the compounding pharmacies.
Again, this is like, to me, like what's the point of having a special ed for drugs? Like these are drugs that are not, you know, apparently good enough to be FDA approved.
I mean, even if you look at some of these ones on the current list of category 1, you have melatonin, creatine, CoQ10, which are pretty curcumin.
Yeah, it's basically OTC.
I think there's a very good point though, as to why people taking research only animal grade peptides should not be taking that.
Of course not. That's retarded.
They should take. But is it not better that they take clinical grade stuff with physician oversight?
I think that, you know, nobody needs these medicines. I'm looking at the list.
Take the animal research stuff.
Drugs have to be that's like saying people shouldn't take heroin. They should take weed or something like that. They're both illegal. I think that BPC. I'm looking at this BPC thing. So BPC was removed from category 2. I mean, this is so dumb. So, okay, here's the list under evaluation. Curcumin, this is a joke. Like citrulline, it's literally an amino acid. These aren't drugs. These are just fucking...
But right now...
Ribose, the sugar?
Some of them are obviously over-the-counter. Some of them are drugs. Enclomiphene is a drug. We're the largest prescriber of enclomiphene in the United States.
That's a DESI drug, wasn't it?
It's a component of an FDA-approved drug. It's 62%. It's a stereoisomer of Clomid, which has been FDA-approved since 1967. There's a really interesting, and you might know the history, Martin, in terms of Repros Pharmaceuticals tried to bring it to market.
I remember those guys.
Yeah, which never got done. But it's essentially a pure version of Clomid. It's a superior drug when they've done the head-to-head studies. And compounding allows for a legitimate route for it to be prescribed.
Yeah, I mean, that's what an NDA is for,
like that,
right? Like that's what an NDA is for. Clomid was obviously taken off the market. It was approved in 1967, so it's a DESI drug.
Yeah, it's still on the market.
I don't think it's provided at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's not whoever the generic manufacturer
discontinued.
Yeah, it is not producing it anymore.
Yeah, and so. Like,
okay, so for Cam, why isn't it FDA approved?
It is FDA approved. It's the enantiomer.
Clomid is FDA approved. Enclomiphene is not, but because it's a component of an FDA-approved drug, it
It's
can
just
be
a
compounded.
it's a stereopure. It's N-clomiphene, literally, right? There's an S-clomiphene too, and so the enantiomer is approved. This is like R-ketamine and S-ketamine. It's technically a new chemical entity, but like I think that's sort of like a very weird edge case of like, okay, the N-clomiphene stereoisomer is prescribable, but the clomiphene was prescribable as well. So it's not really that's not a new drug in any way. It's just sort of like the stereopure version of the old drug. But like glutathione, glutaraldehyde, like these are all pretty innocuous. Like, I don't see anything interesting on this list. Like,
Would you be okay with those drugs?
I mean, these aren't
The
drugs.
clomiphene?
these are
With these compounded,
these are
I mean,
barely.
enclomiphene is right.
Clomiphene was FDA approved, and it was a DESI drug, so it never underwent phase 3 trials.
just say it's a drug, bro.
Well, they're all like, how do you define a drug? It's not, DESI drugs are drugs that were grandfathered in before the Drug Evaluation Standards Initiative, which was created by thalidomide. How quickly we forget, the lessons of thalidomide. And when I look at this list, I'm very gratified because it's a list of, I mean, literally, it's tea tree oil. Nobody's going to die from tea tree oil, thank God. Nobody's going to die taking theanine or citrulline. So this is a list of like, semi-inert non-drugs. Clomiphene, again, I don't even remember kind of what Repros was doing here, but I remember them closing up and failing. But like, clomiphene would be maybe an exception here. But again, it's been around for 60 years, and this is just stereopure version of a drug that basically got discontinued. But the rest of these are like kind of DESI drugs or like non-drugs. Like ribose is a freaking sugar, right? It's not a drug. Vanadium is as well. So
what would you call it?
I mean, vanadium's a chemical element. These are substances that are not FDA approved as drugs, but they're
Getting
something
prescribed at it like it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, compounding pharmacy is this really tiny, shitty, little, crappy industry, and it serves a purpose for people who, if you can't swallow a pill, compounding pharmacies will grind it up for you and send it to you, and it costs a fortune because you can charge the insurance company whatever you want, and it's a weird little racket industry. A lot of times it gets into trouble, as was said earlier, because they'll do stuff that they shouldn't. And then they'll get regulated or smacked down by an insurance company or whoever, and they'll pop up and do it again. They've been doing this with different eye drugs, with different, there's a whole little racket about like how to make money in compounding pharmacies by skirting law. And the reality is like, these are generally not needed other than, like I said, in those cases where a child needs to take a drug, but the pill is really bulky. I need to, grind it down. And I don't know how to do that without compounding pharmacy or turn it into a solution or whatever. That's kind of what they've traditionally been there for. This expansion into, well, let us also do this stuff. Now I look at this list and I say, okay, if somebody needs to put resveratrol, which is known to do nothing at all, and toss that into a pill, okay, let them do that, I guess. But it's kind of a silly, it's a silly thing to expand the purview of a compounding pharmacy to take these like very, aloe vera.
Yeah, just to clarify, the majority of what compounding pharmacies compound is not on this bulks list. Like I said, there's two other routes. It either has a USP monograph or it is an FDA approved drug. So I'll give an example. Like we prescribe oxytocin. right, which has been FDA approved forever as Pitocin. It's an OBGYN drug that's used to induce labor in women. So it's literally probably has a half century of use. But it has a lot of interesting applications outside of OBGYN, but because oxytocin is not
Like what?
patentable, so we use it for stress. It antagonizes cortisol. And there's a ton of studies
How does
actually
it antagonize cortisol?
it lowers cortisol. I mean, it's just I don't know the exact mechanism of action, but there's a lot of studies.
There's an oxytocin receptor, right?
Yeah.
If I can just dive in, I think that the conversation kind of splits between different threads. There is a thread of regulatory control, and then there is a thread of epistemology. Like, how do we actually, like, philosophy of knowledge? How do we actually know that a certain compound can improve certain condition or not? And I think from epistemological point of view, double blind placebo control clinical trial is just the way for us to even know that something works and something helps in a certain condition. And before we have this performed, we cannot claim that something works for something.
Well,
right? We could.
Why
We could.
not?
I think you're a very,
Why can't a
very
doctor claim
rational,
that?
reasonable individual, sir.
Why can't a doctor look at the evidence of
Because he has biases. They have biases, and this is why we invented this clinical trial.
You're the kind of guy. Hold on. Just to the other guy. You're the kind of guy that somebody will say, "I'm a lucky coin thrower," and you say, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, I can throw 8 out of 10 heads or better." And you say, "Wow, unbelievable!" And he says, "You want to buy my magic coin throwing services?" And you say, "Sure." The level of
it's only
evidence.
$30 a month.
Yeah. You can go to HIMSS and they'll sell you the service. Like, you have to do an experiment that tells you whether or not the shit works.
Yes, I mean,
Yeah.
I just.
But just to continue that example, like for instance, there's lots of studies in the use of oxytocin in autism spectrum disorders. So
you're talking to the guy that licensed that drug from Novartis.
Which drug?
Intranasal oxytocin, Syntocinon.
Okay, so yeah, so you know the research behind it.
It doesn't work
for
any of it. It was proven not to work. We wasted a ton of money on this shit. And NIH did a phase 3. I forgot the lady's name who ran the trial at University of Maryland. It was a gigantic failure. It was published in the New England Journal.
Fair enough. I think my point though is just that I think with these generic drugs that for the most part, when the patents are expired, there isn't an incentive for the large pharmaceutical companies to bring them to market, but there is an incentive for doctors to still prescribe these off-label.
Well, hold on, they're not generic, right? They're unapproved.
Well, I mean, they're approved for an original indication, right? Like Pitocin is FDA approved.
Okay, you're talking about those. You're talking about drugs that are approved, but
yes, but if they're so
there could be a
my
new
point is
indication.
Compounding allows for the off-label use, or
well, hold on, drugs can use off-label without compounding.
Let's just decide what do we want? Do we want the drugs to be allowed to be used, or do we want them to be helpful for patients, right?
Just to finish the example, though, the legitimate use of compounding is that it allows for alternative delivery vehicles, right? If you buy the brand name Pitocin, it's an injectable because it needs to have a fast onset of action for OBGYN use.
Because it works on that indication.
Yes, absolutely. But if you're trying to use it for outside of an acute use, like a topical formulation is more useful. But there is no company that's producing that,
because
and so compounding doesn't work for what?
For anybody.
But I wouldn't say that.
Drug companies are pretty good at making money. I mean, if there's something that works out there, we chase it down and we get it approved. Now, of course, there's promising things that are in the twilight of like emerging evidence, right? But like a lot of this stuff is just horseshit, and most of it is. And there are some like situations, edge cases where it's like, yeah, like in clomiphene, I can kind of believe, it's a SERM, it makes sense.
But like, oxytocin, the sad thing about that situation is that parents with autism, kids with autism, they don't have anything. So they are just they're willing to try anything for their child. Unfortunately, there are no FDA approved drugs for autism.
Everyone would exploit that, right?
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Compounding pharmacies would love to prescribe get prescriptions for oxytocin, charge the insurance company 25 grand, and the insurance company, gets guilted enough to do it, and they're giving these kids a placebo. I mean, it's and the doctor's like, look, I got to get this patient off my back. They want something. So what they traditionally do is 50% of kids with autism are prescribed SSRIs. They don't work. They've been proven to not work. But the patient gets taken to the doctor. The parents say, give him something, and the doctor says, well, SSRIs aren't dangerous, so here's a Zoloft prescription, and they put the kid on it, and it doesn't do anything, and at least they tried. And oxytocin and other things like that are, people try lots of things for autism because they're scared for their child. They want to do something. They want to
Compassion placebo pills.
basically.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, Martin. And as a psychiatry professor, I think it's unethical to be overprescribing SSRIs, especially to children. I guess my question to you is, in a very different use case, if an adult wants to take oxytocin, let's say as an alternative to an SSRI to improve their mood or stress, and it is an off-label indication. There's little research, but there's some interesting potential evidence that it can help, and it's relatively benign drug.
It's definitely benign. Yeah.
Should they and their physician have the right to make a decision essentially to take something, let's say experimentally off
Well, I
label?
think that the should is not my domain necessarily. I think that they can, right? And that's all that matters is they can. That's legal. And, my own opinions on whether it works or not, kind of irrelevant, right? If the doctor and the patient want to try something, if a patient's been at their wit's end and nothing's working for them, yeah, I mean, that's the law. They're allowed to do that.
I would say they should not. I would say that their mathematical expectation of this exercise is negative.
I agree.
They
Yeah,
should go and
I don't.
they should go and try to find something that has some evidence to be able to work for
Now
them.
hold on.
Otherwise,
I
they're
But
think
what if
right.
it's not FDA
I think the
approved?
doctor
Whoa,
will
whoa,
tell
whoa.
you that unfortunately reality is not that neat. I think you're right from a pen and paper perspective, but medicine's a weird thing. I'll give you a good example. There was a drug called Herceptin. It's still trastuzumab. It's still used for HER2 positive breast cancer. It was a
Yeah,
amazing
absolutely.
drug.
I use it my decks. Yeah,
What's that?
yeah. I'm using it in my presentations. Yeah.
Yeah, Herceptin has changed the world, right? And it was the first drug, if I recall correctly, to be given with immunohistochemistry to determine
Yes,
whether or
you're
not
correct.
the patient was HER2 positive. Before that, breast cancer was treated fairly uniformly. But it turns out that breast cancer isn't one disease. You could have HER2 positive, and there's actually some other things in there. But to focus on HER2 for a second, let's say the benefit was 12-month survival enhancement, but 30% of the patients are HER2 positive. And if you distill it to those 30%, they live an extra 12 months. Now, pretend there's a world where there's no immunohistochemistry. There's no FISH. So the FISH test is gone. And you give this drug to patients that are both HER2 positive and HER2 negative because you don't even know that this protein exists. You just stumbled upon it. And there's many drugs like that. And it turns out that if you do the math, you would get a 3 or 4 month survival benefit. Still good enough to be FDA approved, still good enough to use. I would give my patient that, 3 months better than no months. But you've noticed a pattern as a doctor, and you say, you know what? I think some of these patients, I'm noticing that either they get 12 months or they get no months. There has to be some explanation behind this. And so the neatness of like the negative expected value and the reality where, sometimes my patient is happy just to try something. And there is a placebo effect. Sometimes my patient may benefit. For example, there's some drugs where there's a 5% response rate. That's a really low response rate. A good example is Proleukin or interleukin 2 for melanoma and renal cell carcinoma. really, really low response rate. But if it's you that gets a response and their cancer goes away, you're pretty happy. So there are lots of edge cases where, you don't really know everything you want to know about medicine. Clozapine is a funny example. I almost acquired clozapine from Novartis as well. And clozapine is thought to be this really weird antipsychotic that seems to be the drug you want to go for when you have treatment-resistant schizophrenia. The problem with clozapine is there's a rare side effect that's very, very serious. Doctors don't give clozapine until they've tried everything. Clozapine is a very odd example of a drug that lots of doctors use in reserve. And again, all these little stories are just to suggest that medicine is not as simple as the expected value calculation each time. For most of the cases, I think it probably is right. But if somebody, for example, has very severe anxiety, I have anxiety, panic disorder, and my brother has it as well, and it's very resistant to benzos even for him, which is hard to imagine how bad that anxiety is. Oxytocin probably doesn't do anything, but you get a little comfort that you're trying. The doctor, feels good that he's doing something for his patient. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It's not dangerous. I don't disagree that, it's unlikely to be this great outcome, but, you never know if that's the time that the patient snaps out of it. That's the time that it encourages the patient to get other kinds of therapy. It's not as neat as maybe, it would seem, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I agree
I
with
feel
that. I
like
think it's good to have, I think it's just good to give patients options because right now in psychiatry, it's so dominated by the SSRIs,
Oh,
which
it's
is,
brutal.
I think, a terrible tragedy. And because the FDA approval process is so onerous, it's obviously super hard to bring new drugs to
Well,
market.
I wouldn't blame. That's the thing. I mean, I agree with you on the psychiatry side. We've been using the same drugs for 40 years, basically. There's not been a new psychiatry drug in a while. The recent Cobenfy approval, apparently that drug just doesn't work that well, and the clinical trial is more of a fluke for the muscarinic for schizophrenia. I was very hopeful that was a new avenue, but it's not. And then for anxiety and depression, we basically haven't had anything new in a long time other than ketamine. So it's slim pickings. Whereas you get new
Right.
drugs every day in oncology. We got nothing in psychiatry. Partially, it's not the FDA's fault. I think the FDA stands ready to approve any new treatment. They approved Cobenfy very quickly, arguably too quickly. I think that the hard part is we just don't know brain. We don't know what the brain does. We don't know the brain science that how does the brain give rise to the mind, and how does the mind find itself in maladies, and how do we treat them? We don't know. We barely understand neurology, let alone psychiatry, and
Right.
it's a miracle that SSRIs ever happened. It's a miracle D2's ever happened, I think. And if we someday will understand psychiatry, whether it's through genetics or animals or God knows how, it'll be great because this is one of the biggest burdens of healthcare. Mental health, whether it's depression, schizophrenia, OCD, bipolar, autism, etc. This is now that cancer is being more effectively treated, I don't know that. I think psychiatry is going to be the number one kind of cause of, you could do quality or whatever metric you want, but number one cause of suffering, net, it's probably going to be psychiatry at some point, as cancer is very technical, right? Cancer, you can get it down to the exact protein, the exact mutation.
Right, and there's no
quick question
molecule that will
for
give
you.
you a meaningful and fulfilling life. It's a much harder existential question to solve.
Well, yeah,
As depression is also
Not
super
yet.
you're right.
Not yet.
multifactorial. There's no clear biological marker for it because it's a very complex thing. But to use an example, like neuroendocrinology is like a super fascinating field, right? As opposed to trying to agonize the serotonin receptors. One of the interesting things when we published the enclomiphene studies is we snuck in psychiatric measures, the PHQ GAD measures. Now, we don't market it for the treatment of depression and anxiety, but we were interested to look at if you improve someone's testosterone levels, because people are often low, does it improve their mood and anxiety? And we did actually find statistically significant findings. So, again, I'm not saying this is the cure for depression and anxiety, but what I think is interesting is through off label use and through compounding pharmacies, we can basically start testing and researching different avenues or different mechanisms to address some of these conditions.
Yeah, I mean that's a longer discussion, and I'd love to read the paper because I'm without reading it, I can't say anything. But it's you know, there's a reason there's the Cedar and Sieber, right? Like making claims on a medicine of efficacy, you know, requires, you know, FDA approval. And that's why like compounding pharmacies aren't allowed to advertise exactly. And they sort of, I've seen compounding pharmacies try to skirt that a little bit and drum up business basically, right? Like they want their services used, especially for like these little unique things that they have. I remember there was a company that had like one compounding pharmacy tried to make a version of our medicine, one of my medicines, after a price hike, and they were like, "Well, we'll compound this," and we're like, "Well, you know, there's no shortage, there's no, you know, et cetera." And they were just trying to apparently get traffic to their compounding pharmacy for this eye drug they had, some eye drop or something. That, and then we learned that the eye drop they were selling was just this really, really expensive, kind of unnecessary thing. And they basically had salespeople trying to get doctors to write compounding scripts. And again, it's sort of a weird business. It's just a bit of an odd cottage industry, and it often will get itself into trouble. There was this big case where the compounding pharmacy had a drug that caused a lot of, I don't know if it was death or severe side effects, and that got the industry under some hot water. Since then, it's sort of come back. Every now and then, it gets this like blessing as a way to reduce drug costs. But the amount of compounding pharmacists that work at compounding pharmacies is very low compared to the entire country's needs for medicine. You know, that's why pharmacies, the high throughput pharmacies, you know, work. You know, they are not this high touch, single patient focused kind of thing. They're you know, they're mills that operate really efficiently for millions of patients. So I think compounding pharmacy is beyond the point here. I mean, the point in general was sort of to talk about, you know, this non sort of U.S. importation of medicine.
Do you agree with
Big boy,
what the FDA did?
Go ahead.
Do you agree with what the FDA did?
With what? What thing did they do?
Well, their intent is to try to shut down the overseas gray market and move it to compounding pharmacies.
I don't know if the FDA's intent is to do anything, right? This is a Congress thing. Right? FDA doesn't.
The
FDA
issues warning letters.
Sure, but the FDA,
compounding pharmacies as well as research labs.
That's enforcement. I mean, they're not allowed to make laws. They have laws.
No one said that. You just said that FDA didn't do anything.
No, but he says, what does the FDA? Do you agree with the FDA did? First of all, what the fuck? What? What thing did they do? That
it's pretty obvious what their intention. Like,
no, the FDA doesn't have an intention. Their job is to do their job. They don't have intentions. They don't intend to cut off foreign.
That's a semantic point. RFK, FDA, like the intention is to shut the stated intention of what they said.
There is a law book. The Code of Federal Regulations is the law book. Like that, the only way you get a law into the law book is through Congress. You know, so maybe Congress wants to shut down the gray market. I couldn't tell you what Congress wants to do or not wants to do. The FDA is an organization you submit filings to. They have a small enforcement division, but you know they don't really do much enforcement.
So
go ahead.
Do you think it like? So you don't think that this gray market overseas peptide should get shut down in favor of compounding pharmacies?
I don't see those as like related. You know, if you want to break the law and bring drugs into the United States against the law, against interstate commerce trafficking and CFR 505, you break the law. You can do that if you want. But compounding pharmacies aren't like some solution to that. They're two different things.
Well, the interesting thing, first of all, we should call it the black market, not the gray market. I think it's pretty black.
I must have misspoke.
I think it's pretty. I think it's a euphemism that people have been using, especially on X and Twitter, to try to legitimize an illegal industry. It's absolutely a black market. In RFK's recent statement, I think his hypothesis, and I don't know if this is the truth, is that by moving these peptides to the Category 2 do not compound list, that his contention is that they've essentially created and incentivized the black market, because previously some of those peptides, now whether it was right or wrong to prescribe them, to Martin's point, I think that's up for debate, but by making it basically impossible to compound, all the compounding pharmacies stopped producing these, and then it allowed for the proliferation of the black market. So I think RFK's hypothesis is that by bringing them back into category 1 and allowing them to be compounded, it'll at least allow telemedicine companies to be, prescribing these. And now whether they should or not is a different matter, but at least that if, from a
Yeah, I
harm
mean,
reduction
to me,
standpoint,
this
if they
isn't
can get it
silly.
from a US,
I mean,
FDA regulated
this
pharmacy,
is
it's less risky.
this is like saying, we should put cocaine and heroin on that list too. Like, what, there's no difference. Why? You haven't earned any right to be on any list if you haven't produced any evidence a drug works. Just because people want to take it, fuck that. It's
I mean,
illegal.
it is. It's like a harm reduction and prohibition, type argument,
I
right?
guess so.
It's like,
But it's a sign of the
like
times.
ketamine you can buy from the streets,
Yes,
right?
yes.
You can also get it prescribed.
I think it's
And
it's a little crazy that we've gotten to this point where that we should like take the vices people have and just like say, okay, let's give you a way to do this vice, but through adult supervision.
well, I mean, again, it's like these aren't recreational drugs like coke and crack and
To me,
heroin.
it
These are
seems like
people
they are like,
trying to improve their health,
right, but
right?
without.
Not in a way that they're partying at a rave. And again, like, was that the right argument for weed? Like, was it better when weed was illegal,
I don't know, but I
or is
will
it
say
better
that
now?
it's very strange to me that we want to.
Was it better when alcohol was illegal?
I don't know. I
Did
mean,
that just incentivize more
it's
crime?
beyond my pay grade, but I think that taking medicines that don't work and letting people sort of take them, it's lunacy. I mean, it's just such a strange thing. I mean, in some ways, alcohol is lunacy too. I mean, you want to take this poison. I understand. I took some poison today. Um, so I get that, but I also feel like, we sort of have this. We built this FDA over 60 years, and we've gotten the best medicine ever out of it. Drugs that truly work that you can rely on, and we want to throw it all away for what? Because some idiot wants to try some molecule that doesn't work. I mean, it's foolish to me, and I thank God that I don't. Again, as I look at that list one, this is an okay, category 1. Like, these are not dangerous substances. These are fantastic, but the day BPC is on this list or something like that, it'd be a terrible day for America.
Well, the interesting thing is the moment that it moved to category 1, the latest things that I'm hearing is that it's not going to necessarily be compoundable. LegitScript, which is the regulatory or entity that oversees some of this, has said unless it meets those 3 criteria that I said, if it's not FDA approved, even if it's or unless it gets placed. These aren't going to automatically be prescribed. So it's not going to be a free for all. I think, like some people think, just because RFK is moving them to the list. To
They
your
But
need
point,
to
if
get
there is,
they need to
if
get
it gets added in July,
they can need to get rid of this
then
RFK guy. Like, what the fuck is he doing? Like, he doesn't know anything about health in the fucking first place. He's not a doctor. He's never done any pharmaceutical things. Like, we had a.
Martin, what's your take on psychedelics? Like,
I mean, they work. It's pretty incredible. I mean, GHRS is a good example. GH Research that does one of the DMT derivatives. The data is amazing. Psilocybin, the data more or less is approvable. Ketamine's approvable. I mean, some of these work for certain diseases, especially depression.
Right. So, would you support RFK's kind of more recent or Trump's more recent executive order, kind of accelerating psychedelic?
I mean, they have to get
adoption?
FDA approval like everybody else, right? I mean, there's no special road because you're a psychedelic. I mean, that's just a side effect, and the FDA has no problem with dissociative side effects. We've had that for a long time with certain drugs, and some side effects will kill you, and it's still worth the risk reward. So, to me, psychedelic it's just a drug with dissociative properties, and that's if the benefits outweigh that risk, then they'll get FDA approval. It's not even my opinion, right? This is just FDA fact. I think that there's been this like weird perception that the FDA is against these drugs, and it's totally nonsense. I remember having a conference. I had ketamine. Another company had cannabidiol. This is GW Research, which got sold for a huge amount. And then there was Jazz Pharma, which had GHB. And three of us were sitting around. We're like, so you sell date rape drug, I sell weed, and Martin's trying to sell ketamine. What a fucking party we have here. It's like a stodgy pharmaceutical conference. This is 20 years ago. So, anything that works will get FDA approval if it makes sense for patients. There's no conspiracy to block this stuff. It's just hard to get good evidence. And drug companies are, look, the lack of patents doesn't help. The fact that psychiatry, which is a quagmire, doesn't help, et cetera, et cetera. But, in terms of RFK, I mean, I think this guy's dangerous. Like, I think that we're better off with, what we built. We used to be a country that cured cystic fibrosis with, like, by the company Vertex Pharmaceuticals that created literally a cure for CF. There's a book called The Antidote that's, goes through that story. That's a miracle. That's a life-saving drug that hard science made. And we've slid all the way down to BPC 1/7. Like, it's an embarrassment. Like, we should be back to making drugs like trastuzumab. And of course, that hasn't gone away. There's a new RAS inhibitor for cancer that just doubled overall survival for pancreatic cancer.
What do you think the FDA could do better?
Nothing. I've dealt with the FDA.
You think it's perfect?
I've dealt with the FDA my whole life. I don't.
You don't think it could be improved?
I don't have
whatsoever?
a single complaint about the FDA.
Mine. Let's use the example of ketamine since you brought it up. So there is an FDA approved version of it, right? As you know, S-ketamine, Spravato. It costs $10,000 for the first month of treatment, but because it is an FDA approved drug, there are telehealth companies and compounding pharmacies that are using generic ketamine, not the stereoisomer, and prescribing it for a lot less.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about that?
15, 20 years people have been doing it. It's fine. I mean, it's legal.
Right, it's legal, and my argument is that it increases access to an medication that does have evidence
FDA
behind
has
it.
nothing to do with pricing or access. The FDA determines whether or not a drug works. That's it, right? Does it work? Is it safe? Next. And ketamine around 2011, Zarate at Yale started to show that ketamine had remarkable antidepressant effects that we didn't know about for 50 years. Many were skeptical. A couple of double-blind trials later by Zarate, Burroughs, other guys like that, all of a sudden my company and Johnson & Johnson get really excited. Hussein Manji at J&J presses the gas. They get it approved. They do 4 double-blind placebo-controlled studies. They work. They got approval. They did the world a huge favor by showing that it worked or didn't work. But as soon as the Zarate study started working, there was immediately ketamine clinics popping up pre-approval. And it makes sense. It's an FDA-approved drug. It's been around for 60 years. We know what we're dealing with when we deal with ketamine. People have given it literally millions of times for surgery especially. And if you have a new use that's emerging in the literature, published literature, and doctor wants to try it, you should try it. I mean, if you've got somebody in your family who's at treatment-resistant depression is at risk of suicide, I mean, you get them on ketamine, fuck the approval. You get them on ketamine as fast as possible. But prices don't have anything to do with it. I mean, the FDA's job isn't to decide what a good price is or a bad price is. If J&J prices it at $10K, that's up to J&J. If they think that's where they maximize Pareto revenue, that's their prerogative. That's not the FDA's choice.
Yeah, that's right. But the FDA does regulate compounding pharmacies, and if they can provide
this has
a
nothing to do
cheaper
with
alternative.
pharmacies.
Sorry, say that again.
This has nothing to do with compounding pharmacies.
No, the analogy that I'm making is the compounding pharmacies allow for cheaper alternatives to getting access to ketamine because you can purchase the non-brand name version.
Absolutely not. Compounding pharmacies are inordinately expensive for insurance because they're one-off prescriptions that are massively, I mean, they're not cheap.
No, but for an individual patient, they could cash pay and get off-label ketamine for much cheaper than the brand name version.
But you can get IV ketamine for very cheap. No compounding pharmacy is needed at all, right? You just get IV. There's no compounding pharmacy involved. Why would you ever involve one when you can get the IV?
Because the clinics that do the IVs are still actually quite expensive, and so when telehealth companies like MindBloom came around and allowed it to be done in a non-IV fashion through sublingual or subcutaneous administration, it was much cheaper and much more accessible than going to a clinic that requires an IV.
Well, that's an insurance question. I mean, if the insurance companies, nobody's paying $10,000 out of pocket for ketamine. It's covered by insurance. If the insurance company feels that you haven't proven you're treatment resistant, you could try some more SSRIs, then you're going to have to do that. If you want to skip that line, go find some weird edge case way to do it. You can go to Mexico. I mean, there's 100 edge case ways to get ketamine if you want. But, at the end of the day, this is an insurance problem. The primary purveyor and payer for medicine in this country is insurance. And, if your insurance decides you're not depressed enough, I mean, it sucks. I think it's terrible. But at that point, you can go pay $500 to get the IV. You can go fuck around with, these compounding things. You can go to Mexico. You can go to the street corner. I mean, you got alternatives. But
yeah, but my point is, though, I think insurance is the worst part of this entire system, right? Because they're not, providing the incentives.
got a better idea?
I think the better idea is
Cash
a
pay.
cash pay system in which, but
Doesn't
the
really
price
work
has
for-
to be accessible enough.
Doesn't really work
for
for pharma. I mean, you have patents. How do you cash pay? I invent a new drug for cystic fibrosis, $300,000. How do you cash pay for it?
Yeah, I'm not concerned about the patented drugs. I'm talking like using the example of ketamine. There's still a market to be
These
made.
things never happen. I mean, it's very rare. Ketamine's a 1 in a million, situation.
Yeah, but you take a 1 in a million drug, the ketamines, the GLPs that are effective,
GLPs
and you
can't
democratize
do shit,
access.
you can't do shit about
access.
GLPs. I mean, GLPs are patent protected. I mean, that's the company's property. I mean, how do you lower costs in GLPs? I'm not aware of a way.
You compound them.
How?
Or Fondeo. Fondeo is
How do you
cheaper.
steal
right?
another company's drug and compound them? I don't get that.
I think they're
Fondeo is cheaper.
well,
Huh?
and there are off patent the like liraglutide and the older GLPs.
Yes, you can take liraglutide for $5. Sure, that's I think whether you that's not even compounded, right? I mean, you can get liraglutide.
Sure,
that's out.
and the patents for semaglutide in Canada was never properly filed, so that doesn't
help me
apply
here.
there.
Yeah, but those are just generics, right? I mean, compounding doesn't play a role in it.
Well, it does because it allows for compounding
Why?
pharmacies to compound them without violating IP.
Yeah, but that's what a generic drug is for.
Do you think there's any dosing innovation done by the compounding pharmacies?
No, this is a shitty little tiny crappy industry nobody cares about. Why are we talking about it?
There absolutely is dosing innovation. So, like in clomiphene,
look, you're in that business.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
Some of the stuff you've said has bordered on, by the way, advertising, and I'd be pretty careful. Many compounding.
we don't prescribe ketamine for.
It's fine. Clomiphene is what I'm talking about.
Sure, but it's because it's a pertinent example. I'm not trying to shill my shit.
Yeah, just make sure you don't shill it too hard, because I know a bunch of guys that went to jail for this.
Fair enough.
Compounding is less than 1% of all prescriptions. It's less than probably 0.1%. It's just not worth talking.
I think it's
1 to
3%. You think?
Yeah, I think it's 1 to 3%.
1 to 3% compounding pharmacy,
and it's going to grow dramatically, right? If
at its peak, it was also 20 to 25% of the GLP production during the shortage.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a one-off situation, but
1 to 3% in general. And actually, the vast majority of compounding is not even going direct to patient. It's actually provided to hospitals and clinics.
Yeah, I think it's closer to 0.1%. But
I think it's dramatic. I think it started there. I think it's dramatically grown and will only continue to grow as the telehealth industry rises. I think it's going to be at least 10% if the GLPs continue to be able to be compounded, right? If 12% of Americans are on the majority of the folks who are on a GLP-1 probably are getting it from a compounding pharmacy now.
Well, what is a compounding pharmacy doing? There's nothing to do. It's an injection.
They're making it just cheaper because it's cash pay.
What's the source? They source it cheaper than a pharmacy can. It doesn't make sense.
The insurance-based listing price for GLPs is usually like $500. I think it got down to like $1 to $250 for semaglutide for Wegovy.
My understanding, compounding pharmacies is very, very different, and my expectation is that compounding pharmacies is well less than 1% of all prescriptions. It's just
1 to 3%. Looking at,
I don't think so. I don't think. Where are you getting that number?
Source Biospace Global Market Insights.
Yeah, I don't know where they're getting that number.
American Pharmacists Association.
Yeah, I don't think it's true.
Okay, well, I can send you the link if you want to look at
it. No, I just know that it's not true. It's just such a small little industry, and it's
okay. Well, I'm looking at it right now.
I'm sure you're looking at something that says that.
If you don't want to look at it,
I don't think you're hallucinating. I just think you're wrong.
Yeah. Well, you can. I mean, if you're not interested to see it, then
no, not really. This is, like I said,
you're just choosing to be ignorant. Then
no, I'm not choosing to be ignorant. I just know this is a shitty little crappy industry.
How big do you think it is?
You seem to be more bullish on it.
Martin, though, do you think the rare drugs?
You're involved in that industry, but
I mean,
to me, why aren't compounding pharmacies public and flourishing and have tons of revenue?
Fagrin is a public company.
I know Fagrin. It's not a big company.
Well, it's a public company. You just said.
There's one public company. They've been around forever. It's not a particularly successful company. But most people have heard of CVS and Walgreens.
So the latest estimates were at peak that 30% of people on a GLP were getting it from a compounding pharmacy, and the expectation is that that's going to grow over time.
Where's the revenue? Where's the proof? Fagrin has $1 billion in revenue. Walgreens revenue is, let's see here.
I don't find the point, though, that just because it's
150 billion.
Sure, but just because it's
do we want to talk about margins?
Let's add CVS.
Margins versus revenue.
Well, margin is because it's a ripoff. Everybody knows that. The CVS revenue is 400 billion. Maybe half of that is pharmacy. So it's 300 billion in pharmacy revenue in the U.S., which tracks pretty well with drug revenue, and compounding revenue. I mean, I can find one company that has $1 billion in revenue. That's 30 basis points.
You think the market's like the revenue is smaller than 10 billion a year or more?
Oh, hard to say. I don't know for sure. I think so.
I guess it's around 10.
Martin, I'm just kind of curious.
But revenue and volume are totally different.
Right, and revenue and margin are very different. Like Walgreens has a lot of revenue. Walgreens is about to go bankrupt.
These places are generally understood to be rip-off houses. Many of them get closed for violating the law. Compounding pharmacy is well known to be just a scam industry.
Let's see. Walgreens is hanging on by a thread. CVS is alive because of Caremark and their PBM rebates.
Well, look, pharmacy is not a great business in general. I mean, but compounding pharmacy is like the drug dealing, the dark side of pharmacy.
I'd say it's the cash pay side of pharmacy, which is more competitive overall and better for consumers because there's more price transparency.
Look, are you invested in the space?
Not yet.
Okay. Yeah, I'd stay away from compounding pharmacies.
I mean, it makes sense why you don't like compounding.
I don't. Why?
You're more pro big pharma and patents.
I'm pro biotech and pharma. Yes.
Yeah.
Are you heavily invested in biotech and pharma?
No, but biotech and pharma has created the great drugs that our American lives depend on. Compounding pharmacies are just ripoff houses. They take a prescription. They sell. First of all, they sell, which is illegal. They sell and try to get doctors to write prescriptions, and they charge insurance a massive number. Patient doesn't pay, so that's what insurance is for. But it's basically a scam, and it's well known to everybody in the industry what compounding pharmacies are all about. They're about this weird loophole where you can get an N-of-1 prescription, go to Aetna and say, this is $30,000. This is eye cream we made. And eye cream cost us $30 to make. But you go charge Aetna it anyway, and they pay. And they don't pay at scale, but they just get annoyed, and they're just like, all right, fuck it, we'll pay this claim. And you do enough of those, you got a little $1 million, $2-3 million business, and it's usually run by one guy. Half the time he's got one foot in jail or on his way. Half the time he doesn't. And it's just this little shitbird industry. I don't know how we got onto this stuff.
I think it's just dramatically changed. That may have been true in the past, but a lot of these compounding pharmacies are now 50 state licensed, and the majority of the business is done through the cash pay market. So they're not trying to rip off. They're not trying to rip off insurance.
Who's the biggest, most successful compounding pharmacy?
The specific pharmacy,
Well, company,
it's probably Empower Pharmacy.
I've never. Has anybody heard of this company?
If you're in the space,
probably the yes,
it's a 503. It's a 503A and a 503B.
I've literally never heard of it. I'm Googling it. The first thing I see is FDA warning letter.
I mean, it's HIMSS and the market caps of the other telehealth companies that are a better indication of the market size, because they all work through compounding pharmacies.
Yeah, HIMSS is $7 billion. Okay, it's something. HIMSS almost got sued into the ground too. Now they're just a Novo distributor.
Yeah, it was because they were reckless with their marketing claims, not because of the.
That's literally all That's literally all compounding pharmacies. So Empower's revenue is $400 million. That's like 1 day, less than 1 day of Walgreens revenue. That's like 1 hour of Walgreens revenue. It's a shitty industry. You really think compounding is this exciting, cool industry? Come on.
It's probably like 40% EBITDA versus like 10.
Well, it is a rip-off industry. There's no doubt about that. I mean, they do these crazy insurance scams. I mean, that is, if you want to get into that, there's all kinds of ways to scam people.
What was your experience with them?
Compounding pharmacies? I don't have any experience with them.
Martin, I thought you said you had a eye drop experience.
Yeah, I mean, I know of the industry. I know that I know what they do. But, most doctors don't interact with them, care about them. HIMSS tried to break the law, basically, via compounding pharmacies, and they got smacked around for it. And now they just are selling GLPs on behalf of Novo, and they, I'm sure, have a terrible deal, and that's why their stock's crapped out. And it's just, the space is, it's very hard to innovate in this space. I mean, you have rules for a reason, I think. It's kind of what I've been saying. These rules exist, and they protect patients. And I think a lot of the compounding guys are pretty unscrupulous. But certainly, there's nothing wrong with taking, a medicine that like I said, is in pill form. The kid can't swallow it, and you turn it into something swallowable. That's legitimate compounding pharmacy. It's just that they do a lot of illegitimate stuff as well. Some of them. And that gets them in the hot water. You can Google and read all about it. I mean, read the warning letters. Well, anyway, this was fun. A lot of disagreements. All healthy stuff, not a personal attack on anybody. I think hopefully it's entertaining to you guys. My phone's running out of energy, and I got to tuck in my son. So thank you so much for joining, and we'll maybe do it again sometime. Thanks again.
Appreciate the discussion.
Thanks, man. Have a good one.
Thanks, Martin.